Welcome to December. We made it past Thanksgiving, on to my favorite month of the entire year, Christmas. Now I know maybe some of you don't celebrate Christmas. I myself am not religious, but the idea of Christmas is what I'm obsessed with. Maybe it's because I was born 2 days after Christmas, that no matter why Christmas exists, I have my own reason for loving it. Christmas to me means something different. And I guess every year I'm gonna try and sort of share that with you. Today we're gonna start off things with Christmas cookies. And last year we did my favorite Christmas cookie, pecan snowballs. Probably one of the greatest cookies ever. Now today I'm excited to add another recipe, and it's a unique family recipe. My mom's aunt, Aunt Rose, her neighbor was German, just like my aunt and my grandma. And she had this weird recipe for these pecan butter cookies. The same neighbor who shared our Thanksgiving stuffing recipe. So she gave my Aunt Rose this recipe. My mom made these cookies growing up my whole life, and it's just so incredible. We haven't had them in a while, so I had to have my mom show me this recipe this weekend, and she hadn't made it in a while, so we were both rusty at it, and we had to sort of work it out. It's a little bit tricky. The reason being is the original recipe is written on this card, and one of my main issues with recipes in general is that they're so vague. They're not specific. They leave out key aspects of a recipe. And this recipe is no different. The classic problem when grandparents pass along a recipe, they assume you know things. So we have a little bit of an updated version, and even this I'm going to sort of go way more in depth. This is just something my mom updated from this recipe, which is confusing, and I can barely read this chicken scratch cursive handwriting. How are you supposed to read that? Why we were ever taught cursive is beyond me. So started with this, my mom moved it to this, and today I'm going to extend it a little bit further, try and make it easier to understand and execute. The key here is how thin we're gonna roll this dough, because it's not a real dough you're used to using. It's very delicate, it crumbles, it's held together by butter and a little bit of egg. The thinner it is, the crisper it's gonna get, and when you make these cookies crisp, that's when they're best. Let's get started and try and figure this recipe out. It's too good to not be able to nail. So let's just jump right into it. First thing is I have about a cup and a half, roughly, of pecans, however you want to say them, no problem with me. We want to blend these into like breadcrumb texture. So fairly fine, but just making sure that you don't turn it into like a nut butter. So we're just gonna throw this in a blender real quick, blend it up nice. So there you go. You want it like sand. That's perfect. Next, I need to melt 2 sticks of butter. I'm just gonna gently warm this up. You don't wanna blast it with heat. You want it to slowly melt and not break at all. So we're just gonna gently melt this away. I got my melted butter. I'm just gonna hold that off to the side. I got 1 egg. I need to separate the egg from the white. The egg is gonna go into the dough. The white is gonna be brushed on top of the dough, and that's gonna be the glue that helps the pecans stick on top. Just gonna mix up the egg yolk a little bit. Just sort of breaks it up, so it just mixes easier when we add it to the dough. And then the same thing with the white. Do this in a bigger bowl. Just like a little foam makes it way easier to spread on top of the delicate dough. Now we need to mix the dry ingredients, and it's basically 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, 3 teaspoons of cinnamon, and then a strange ingredient, Wondra. What is Wondra? It's basically like a trick to gravy, right? You can add this to gravy and it'll create a thickened sauce, and you don't have to make a roux. It's kind of pre-cooked in a way, and it's really fine. And I think the reason why she used this is because it's a finer milled flour than, say, regular all-purpose flour. And the fineness of this flour is what makes the cookie so delicate. So I think you don't need to use Wondra. You could use like a 00 flour, which is the finest grained flour you can. Otherwise, this seems to work really well, and we're just gonna use 2 cups of this. We wanna measure it though by lightly packing it and then leveling it off. So 2 cups of Wondra. And then you take your knife and you're like cutting it. It helps disperse the flour. I just have this little bowl underneath to catch the excess. And just like that, you have a perfect measured cup, lightly packed. And we're gonna get this into a big bowl. And then just repeat. As you can see, it's just super fine. And then in with the sugar, the cinnamon, and then just mix it up. And then add the egg and the butter. At this point, you're gonna wanna probably switch out from a whisk and work it in with a spatula. And as you're gonna see, it's not gonna look the way you're expecting. So it should be crumbly, but it should pinch together sort of like wet sand. Sort of sticks together, but it's kind of not sticking together like a dough you've ever used. We're gonna let this just sort of soak that butter up. So all I have left are the egg whites, the nuts, and our dough. And we need to roll this out as thin as possible. And I'm just gonna do it the same way that my mom taught me how to do it, which is on a sheet tray. But since we have to roll it out and cut it on the sheet tray, I'm gonna do it on the bottom. Parchment paper, get a rolling pin. So now I found it to be quite hard to roll out in one piece of dough. So I'm gonna turn this recipe into 2 batches, and we're gonna roll out half of the dough at once. And I think that's gonna allow us to get it thinner on the sheet tray, which is what I found to be the best way to eat these. I'm gonna take half this recipe. So I'm gonna set the other half aside for my next batch. Now you wanna just push it out. As you push it out, you'll see it'll come together almost like a graham cracker crust. Just keep pushing it together. If it starts to crumble, don't worry. And then start to roll it out with your rolling pin. And if it crumbles, just put it back together. I know it's weird, but it works. So now just take those edges and just try and get it into one piece of dough without any sort of cracks. Now we want to take the egg wash and just lightly and gently brush the top all over so that the nuts can stick. And now we're just going to top it with a thin coating of the nuts. And you can just spread them out. You don't want too much. Less is more here. These are going to be thin, delicate cookies. So just sort of spread them out into a nice, even coating. So now this is going to go into a 350-degree oven for probably 20 minutes. What's gonna see is some browning happening around the edges, and the pitfall we ran into the first time is that we didn't roll the middle out thin enough, and it cooked slower than the edges did. I tried to roll the center out thinner so we don't have that, so we have a nice, thin, even, crispy sort of cookie that we're working with. So this is gonna go in the oven. I'm gonna cook it by time, but also by sight. If I see some browning happening, I kind of like that, and around the 10-minute mark, I'm gonna turn it around 180 to get some even cooking. So now you have to cut it while it's hot. And basically we want to cut them into diamonds, little tiny ones, because it's a fragile cookie. The smaller the cookie, the better. So we're basically gonna cut thin, angular cuts this way, and then we're gonna sort of move it and then figure out how to make sure we get those kind of diamond shapes. Just watch through mouth cam. That's it. Now we just want to cool this so that it sort of firms up. They're easier to handle and pack away and store into a little cookie box. A little Christmas cookie box. Part of the fun of the holidays is cracking one of these open and seeing all of the delicious cookies in there. So get yourself some of these. Cost like $2. Let's pack these bad boys up. Delicious. Two things come to mind when I taste this: baklava and cinnamon toast crunch. That's sort of the flavor profile you can expect with a little bit of crunchiness to it. So delicious. So then you delicately close the bad boy up. You either save this for you and your family, wrap it up in a bow, give it to your neighbor, give it to a friend, and you got nice little gifts to spread some holiday cheer with. Cookie season moves fast, so get baking. So just a reminder, all my patrons and anyone who's ever purchased my plan of attack is in the running for a major giveaway for all of my little goodies that I cook with. Plan of attack is still out and this recipe is going to be added to it. Now we're moving on to the Christmas plan of attack. If you want to get some of the recipes for the holidays and get prepped, exclusive content, all that stuff, plan of attack link is down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Happy holidays. Get in the spirit, do something fun, listening to some music. Whatever you gotta do to lighten up the mood at the end of the year. That's what Christmas is all about. And relax and sort of slow down. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.